I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year zero. With all the hype around the coronavirus and universal health care, I have one of my favorite recurring guests on, student of Murray Rothbard and defense attorney, Michael Harris. How's it going, Michael?
Oh, doing well, Tommy. How are things down in your corner of the world?
Not too bad. We're still busy. We're running. Trucking hasn't stopped yet, so that's a good thing. That is when you need to worry when trucking stops.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, up here in Dallas, everything is going crazy because of the coronavirus. And I personally think the panic related to the virus is more dangerous than the virus itself for the vast majority of Americans, but I'm a lawyer, not a medical doctor.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the way I've been looking at it, and that's what I've been trying to get across to people is like, hey, this panic is not helping anything. Um, I understand that it's a scary situation, but it's not anything that worry is going to fix. So we got on to talk about PMAs. What is a PMA?
A PMA is an abbreviation for Private Membership Association. And basically, it is let me just give you a little overview of how I came to discover and get involved in it.
All right.
About 15 years ago, I fell and fractured my right elbow. And it wasn't anything just terribly serious. Did have to put in a cast for 6 weeks, keep it immobile. And then afterwards, I wanted to do the physical rehab. And basically, the healthcare cartel, which healthcare is a cartel in America these days, it told me that I had to consult with an orthopedic surgeon before I could be referred to a physical therapist. And I told him that, frankly, I thought that was a bunch of bull, that I was a lawyer. There had to be a loophole somewhere, and I was going to find it by God. And that led me to a chiropractor who's just a really interesting guy. I won't go into details unless you really want to, but he told me, Michael, you can accomplish the same thing by doing yoga. And so I got to really like this guy a lot. And he didn't fit within the mainstream healthcare cartel. And so basically, he wanted to he had studied with his father,
Right.
and so he was inheriting his father's practice. But these two cats, they just didn't fit in the system at all. So we kind of put our heads together of how can we set up a way so that they can operate legally on the one hand, yet outside this structure and the rigid system of the healthcare cartel. And that's where we created, well, I'm going to say we, but I was a part of getting involved in setting up private membership associations. And any questions so far?
No, no, I'm
Okay.
keeping up with you.
Okay. Well, basically, it's a well-established principle in our legal system, and I'd go so far as say it's the best kept secret in our legal system is in an up. The bottom line is that we have freedom to associate with
Right.
people. In the First Amendments, it's included as the freedom to peacefully assemble.
Hmm.
It's also included in the Fifth Amendment and right to enter into contracts voluntarily, incorporated in the 14th Amendment from the feds to the state. And this is a way that allows alternative medical practitioners to legally operate in the private domain without a license. And
Hmm.
of course, that's libertarians. We're not too wild about licensing to begin with. And this is a way to get around the requirements of licensing.
Right.
And the main key point to keep in mind is there is a public domain, there is a private domain.
Hmm.
And you can legally do business in the private domain, you can legally do business in the public domain. The real take home point is you can legally do business in both the private and the public domains.
Right. And now, is this like when I was reading through the notes that you had sent me, the first thing that popped in my head is the direct primary care physicians. Is this along the same lines as that?
Well, I think direct primary care more deals with insurance and what
Oh,
insurance, third party reimbursement is the technical term. And several primary physicians have set it up to where they can operate both in the private and in the public.
hmm,
So it's a growing trend that more and more medical providers are setting up to where they can do both. I mean, for example, I mean, you're in the Beaumont region, right?
yes, sir.
Okay, so Beaumont's close to the Louisiana border, fairly close to it.
Yes, sir.
And of course, there's restrictions about doctors being able to treat people in Texas and in Louisiana. Louisiana's got a lot of just strange laws. Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
my mother family from Louisiana. Okay, I love them, but they have some just really really strange laws. And so some doctors, it's my understanding, in the Beaumont area have created it kind of like, you know what, we'll just have a private membership associations specifically to deal with people from Louisiana so that we don't have to run afoul with providing services to people coming across the state border. That's
Yeah.
just one example. And I'm told that there's one doctor who's gone so far as he's got an office with two doors, two entries, one door for his public Texas patients to come in and another door for his private membership association people, whether they're from Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, or wherever, they can come in that door. And so that's his way of kind of setting a distinction, two entries into the same office.
Right. Right.
And so that's his way of getting around regulations and licensing problems dealing with patients from other states.
Yeah, and people don't understand licensing. Even I was talking to my wife the other day, and she had brought up Jacob Hornberger and his campaign and how he had said something about medical licensure, and she was like, "That's one thing I don't agree with him on. Like, I want my doctor to have gone to college and gotten a license." And I'm like, "Baby, they don't get a license from college. They get a degree from college. They get a license
Yes.
from the state. They're buying permission to operate and to act within the state. That's what a license is." And she was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't aware of that." So some people don't even understand the licensing aspect. And I've never met anybody that's gone into a doctor's office and checked their the license on their wall, but I've always known of people that check for that college degree and find out what college they went to. So it's the licenses. If people really understood that, it really meant nothing other than someone bought permission from the state to operate within the state.
Well, I can mainly talk as a licensed attorney. I mean, and the legal profession is a cartel. I'm part of it. Okay, I can
Hmm.
talk about them. And actually, I served on a Texas State Bar grievance committee where we judged attorneys who were accused of violating the Code of Professional Conduct. And I graduated from SMU Law School, took the bar exam, failed the bar exam the first time I took it, but hey, I passed it the second time. And I mean, I've been a fully licensed attorney for 20 years. And like I said, when I served on the State Bar Grievance Committee, we had to judge attorneys for allegedly violating the Code of Professional Conduct. And I can tell you that in the 3 years I was on the State Bar, I recommended two attorneys be disbarred for their behavior. And both times were attorneys who just, one time was an attorney who just blatantly defrauded, committed fraud on one of his clients. He was a personal injury lawyer representing a blind woman, and he said, "Hey, or sign this document here." giving me all the money. So I mean, it was blatant
Oh,
fraud.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, buddy, you deserve to be disbarred for that.
Yeah.
The second one was a lawyer who, ironically, he was representing a doctor in a medical malpractice case. And the jury was literally coming up to start picking the jury, and the guy just ran out of the courtroom, just blatantly abandoned his client. And I mean, I think we could have lived with that, but he had to just blatantly commit perjury at the hearing and come up with this cock and bull story about how he discovered a conflict of interest at the last minute. And all of us at the committee is just kind of like, you just took an oath here a few minutes ago to tell the truth under penalty of perjury, and
Mm,
then you just blatantly committed perjury. So it was kind of the classic case of the cover up being worse than the crime.
yeah.
So yeah, we voted that he should be disbarred for that. But those are the two times in when I was on the committee, as far as my licensing, of when I felt like attorneys should be have their license taken away from them. So I have more of a moderate view on licensing. I
Hmm.
think it's very clearly abused. Like, I don't see how you need a license to braid hair and fish or something like that.
Right. Right.
It's definitely gotten carried away,
Right.
and it's a means to limit the supply. It's a barrier to entry in business to benefit the established people who are established in the business, to cut out newcomers.
Right.
And now I can tell you that my sources tell me in the medical profession that their licensing has really got a problem. I know one attorney who a great deal of his law practice involves representing healthcare providers, doctors, in their licensing process. And he told me point blank that system is totally broken. It just
Oh,
does
really?
not function at all. And I think that's a big part of the reason why more and more medical providers are moving in the direction of private membership associations.
Right. And okay, so back to the private membership associations. When there was a gentleman that Tom Woods had interviewed. I don't know. I want to say it was like 3 years ago, and he was from, I want to say, Ottawa, Kansas. I could be wrong, but he was a family physician, a primary physician, and the way he operated was that he would charge a flat rate to his patients, like let's say $50 a month, and he didn't accept medical insurance. They would pay him $50 a month. Anytime they needed to have a visit with him, they could do so in the office via Skype, or he would make house calls, and he would also provide basic pharmaceuticals at no additional charge. And the only time that you started running into additional charges is if you had things like X-rays and additional testing that were above and beyond what your basically membership um, covered. And so the way that I kind of explained it to people from what I understood, and I listened to the episode a few times, but it's been a while since I listened to it. But the way it always like struck me is he ran it kind of like a gym membership, to where you pay for access to his facilities and to his time on a month to month basis, $50 a person or whatever it may be, maybe a discount for a family, and therefore you don't have to worry about the insurance, the $400 a month insurance bills. You're paying $50 a month to have access to this particular doctor. Now, unlike Blue Cross and Blue Shield or one of these cartels, you wouldn't be able to change doctors under the same plan. Whatever you had paid the guy, you had lost. So if you become unhappy with him and you want to change doctors, then you would have to find another method of payment to pay the other doctor. But it sounded like a very reasonable way, especially for uh, more impoverished families that aren't making a whole lot of money, that can't afford the $500 a month um, insurance payments to cover their family, to
That
have
definitely
basic
sounds like
medical
it was
coverage.
a private membership association.
Mm,
And because one of the complaints I've heard from doctors is that basically when it comes to dealing with insurance companies, the reimbursement from insurance companies is more hassle than it's really worth.
Right.
A lot of them have complained that basically they have to sit down there with a computer and fill out the form as they're talking to people. So it's kind of like rather than actually be treating someone, I spend all my time just basically filling out slots in a computer program. So a lot of doctors are getting to where they don't like insurance. They're kind of like, we just want to get away from this system.
Right.
And so that sounds like that is part of, and it falls under the legal concept of our freedom to associate. And so that gives the providers much more flexibility of how they can run their practice.
Hmm.
And for example, like my chiropractor, he's able to have more say in who he sees, how he treats them, and I get to interact with him and his daughter much more than having to, you know, deal with the insurance company. So it's kind of like he would rather deal with me personally than deal with an insurance company. I would rather deal with him personally than deal with an insurance company.
Yeah.
It's it saves me a lot of money. It saves him a lot of headache.
Yeah,
So it
yeah, and
really,
that's where I was going. Like for a more impoverished family, someone who's making, maybe a single mother that's making $25,000 a year, it's much more feasible to expect her to pay, $50 a month or whatever, and in for a membership than it is to expect her to come out with these excruciatingly painful insurance payments every month. I mean, I ended up canceling insurance years ago because the payments were just the monthly expenses were just getting so extraordinary. I was like,
yes.
I'm not going to pay $80 a month for myself, but if I want to add my three kids, or at the time it was three kids when I finally canceled. I have five now, but I'm not gonna pay an additional, $500 a month. Whenever my insurance isn't even their primary insurance, it's a secondary insurance. You know, they have insurance through their mom too. So like, I'm not doing that. So what I ended up doing is I just worked out a deal with my ex-wife that I paid her money every month instead of paying insurance companies money every month, because it
Yeah,
was just way too much. I just could not, I couldn't do it and still survive.
oh yeah, and to me, when they came out with the quote unquote Affordable Care Act, it really just took a rotten system and made it even more rotten to
Right,
me. I can tell you in my personal case, when the quote unquote Affordable Care Act came into being, I was paying about $250 a month for my personal insurance.
right,
My mother, who was about 75 years old at the time, was also paying $250. She had gotten hers because she was a retired government employee. Her rates were frozen. My rates, on the other hand, because suddenly I'm required by the new Affordable Care Act, I'm required to pay for things like pre-existing conditions, cover premature born babies,
hmm,
drug and alcohol treatment, which is kind of like, hey, I was like in my late 40s. I don't have children. I don't plan on having any children. I don't drink. I don't smoke. And why am I paying for all this stuff that I have absolutely no need for whatsoever?
right,
But what killed me was, I mean, my mother's insurance rates were frozen at $250 a month, and God bless her. I'm happy for that. She didn't have to pay any more than that, but my rates tripled. And I'm
hmm,
like, why am I, a, a, a pretty healthy guy in his early 50s? Why am I paying three times more than an elderly woman who's had two heart attacks in her 80s?
right,
And that's what I told him. It's like, you people are just crazy if y'all think I'm going to be paying, $600 a month, $700 a month for insurance. It's crazy. So that's when I was kind of like, I'm like you. I told him I'm done with this system, and
right,
I got out of it.
right. Yeah, and then they, well, and then they tried to make you pay that fine through the mandate, which I just refused to pay. I was just like, I'm not paying that. I don't care what y'all tell me. I'm just not paying it. And so, and I
Well,
didn't.
I'm a good, fortunately, I know a good lawyer, so I was able to argue that I fit within the hardship category. So they didn't challenge me on it. So,
No, I never got any trouble from it. I would just put it on my, what was it called? Uh, that quick, not QuickBooks. My wife's been working with QuickBooks. I haven't it stuck in my head. TurboTax. I just put it on there that I would exempt myself from it, and I never got any questions. But I was like, I'm not paying that. I just refused to pay it, because no, I'm not gonna pay. And it came out to be more. Well, not more. It was almost the exact same amount they wanted to charge me, as it would have been if I would have just carried my cell phone insurance. And I was like, no, I didn't have any insurance. I'm not going to pay the rates of insurance. You know, of course, yeah, I'm guessing you're self-employed.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So my insurance, but part of mine was picked up by my company. So my rates weren't near as high as yours were. So
Well, the advantage I could have had was I could have claimed it as a legitimate business expense and written it off on my taxes, but to me, it just wasn't worth it.
yeah.
And I mean, if it had gone to the point, I think I could have made a very good argument under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution that they were taking away my rights without due process of law. But they, basically, my understanding was is that the kind of like the bureaucrats wasn't too wild about enforcing the mandate to collect for private insurance anyway. And I disagreed with the United States Supreme Court. I don't see how under the Constitution they can require us to purchase the product of a private company. I don't see how the 16th Amendment, I mean, the 16th Amendment says they can impose a tax. Yeah, okay. I mean, I can see that, but I don't see how they can mandate that we buy a private company's product as a statutory requirement.
Well, I
And
mean, but that doesn't even. Yeah, they may have set a precedent as far as healthcare goes at that point in time, but this isn't the first time that the American public have been expected to to pay and forced to pay for private companies, profiteering. I mean, you can go back when and you read, you know, the Progressive Era by Rothbard, and the whole first chapter he's talking about the railroads and how they used, they forced the public to pay for these railroads. So it's this crony relationship that really, has it kind of come out from under the rock that it was hiding under here recently. It's like they don't even care if you know that it's all a scam now.
well, that's something that Rothbard taught us. He says businesses cooperate with the government usually to either one, pass their cost on to the taxpayers, or two, to cut out their competition.
Yeah.
And of course, the rise of the industrial military complex, and don't get me started on the prison industrial complex. That's a topic for another podcast.
Yes.
But I mean, yeah. So yeah, that with the insurance companies, they're trying to cut out their competition. They're trying to pass their cost on to taxpayers, and it's very blatantly obvious to anybody who studied Murray Rothbard that that's what they're doing. And I think you're going to see more and more of the private membership associations come in as a way around it. And also, being the good Murray Rothbard student that I am, allowed me to point out these countries that have all this grand universal health care, they don't seem to be doing any better at coping with the coronavirus, by the way. So,
Obviously,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I digress that. But
Well, the only exception, and I'm not sure what the healthcare system is in South Korea, but South Korea seems to have a pretty good grasp on it, and they were able to get, and I think part of that was because they were able to get um, a 24-hour test much quicker than almost any other country. Um, the United States, the test that the United States was operating under up until yesterday. I did read something today that they're actually lifting the bureaucracy, and the FDA has approved this what they call, I guess it's pronounced Roche, ROCHE test, that is going to fast track the testing and get results back much quicker than the other test. But the test they had been using prior to the FDA lifting the regulation on the Roche test was taking up to 72 hours to get results back. So that was allowing people to spread the virus. And I think when hindsight, being 2020, once we get through this and we see the actual results, we're going and actually take the time to examine, we're going to realize that the death rate was much lower than they're trying to say it is right now, just due to the fact that 80 to 81% of the people that are coming into contact with the virus and contracting the virus aren't showing any symptoms whatsoever. So if you're not showing any symptoms whatsoever, then you're probably not going to go get tested. And if you're not getting tested, then there's no record of you ever having the virus. And if you come out through the other side without dying, then you go onto the survivor board. So I think when we really look back on it, this number that they're pushing at as between 1 and 3%, it's actually going to be closer to like point 0.4 or 0.6%, like what you're seeing in South Korea.
Yeah, I've also heard that South Korea was system was kind of like they were better prepared for it and they're better responding to it. Now, the last report I've heard here in the state of Texas is that so far only one person has died from the coronavirus like symptoms, is the phrase they use. And it's like a 90-year-old man in South Texas. And, my mother died last year at the age of 83. So I'm sympathetic to his
Right,
family, but kind of like, come on, the guy was 90 years old.
right.
Okay. So, you know, how much longer was he really likely to go anyway?
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't know him personally. Like I said, I'm sympathetic to his family for what they're going through.
right,
My 83-year-old mother died 6 months ago, but it's kind of like, hey, you know what? It was just her time. All right.
right.
I mean, call me cruel and heartless, but she was ready to go, and
Yeah,
she
and
was.
my grandma just she passed away in January, and she was in her 80s. And sometimes it's hard to watch, because they've had such a good life and they've been there your whole life, and there's so many memories. But again, like you said, it's sometimes it's their time to go. And if you really take the time to look at the numbers, which I don't think a lot of people are looking at the numbers, you're seeing that the average age of people dying is 81. I think the actual number was 81.4 years old. Um, from the from from the age of 60 to the age of 80, you're the chances of you dying, it like goes up tenfold. Um, it's something like 15.8% of people 80 or above or are dying once contracting this virus, and below 60 it's something like 0.4%. uh, and
And
once you get below 40 years old, it's 0.2%. So it's
and something
very
that
low.
Ron Paul points out, and oh, by the way, Ron Paul was a practicing medical doctor, and he points out that usually over 6,000 people every year die from the ordinary influenza virus in the United States of America.
Hmm.
And the overwhelming majority of those people are elderly people
Hmm.
who have are people who have problems with their immune system.
Right.
So I firmly believe that the overwhelming majority of Americans who have just an ordinary immune system will be able to handle this virus,
Hmm.
coronavirus, without any problems. Now, I do think it's legitimate to say, well, if our emergency rooms are just flooded with people who have a fever and a cough, it's going to overwhelm the system.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think that's okay. That's a legitimate concern
Absolutely.
that that will happen.
But
But
part of that happening, I'm sorry, but I was just going to say part of that happening is due to the hyperventilating from the media. You know,
yes,
it's like if y'all would just calm down, you know, like we gotta take this one step at a time. And you know, it's like I said on the podcast I released Monday. You know, fear is nothing more than an irrational emotional response to things not yet seen, experienced, or understood. And so that's part of what we're dealing with right now. We just don't know as much about this virus as we could. And
it's
so,
the unknown part of it that we've never seen this particular strain. And oh, by the way, the influenza virus has been mutating for eons. All right,
right,
this is nothing new to human beings,
right, right,
but it's the fact that this is an unknown strain of
absolutely.
the virus that we don't know so much about it. And my favorite all-time definition of fear is the it's an acronym. FEAR stands for future events appearing real. All
Yeah,
right, so it's
yeah,
just
I've
it's
heard
kind
that.
of like it's we just have this unknown future that and it's kind of like what's the worst case scenario. So yeah, I think this is all eventually going to blow over.
Hmm.
But if there's any positive to it, I think that to me it definitely shows the that this universal health care, Medicare for all is just not wouldn't do any better at coping with the virus.
Right.
That and that, I think there is definitely a lot of problems with the current healthcare system that we have, but I
Hmm.
just don't see Medicare for all as anything that's going to solve the problems. To me, the private membership associations is going to be much more effective at dealing with the problems that we have in our current healthcare system. I
I,
really do believe that.
I was talking to Scott one day, and we were having the conversation very similar to that. And he said, you know, the thing about that drives me crazy about leftists is they have the right diagnosis, but they have the wrong prescription. And I was like, yeah, that's about right.
Well,
But
I've told many a socialist that the mistake they make is that they compare their vision of an ideal economic system with the real world corrupt crony capitalism. So yeah, your ideal vision looks so much better
yeah,
than the real world. Now, of course, I have to say, libertarian. I think libertarians make the same mistake when it comes to law. I think libertarians love to play Henry David Thoreau and think they're going to sit on Walden Pond, and and it's kind of like, well, I mean, bless you folks. I love y'all. I love to hang out with y'all, but y'all have this ideal vision of the way the legal system ought to be, and then you look at the real world legal system. So naturally, your ideal system just looks so much better, and it's kind of like, well, to me, you're making the same mistake that the socialists do. So, you
well,
know,
I think that's a problem with all ideologies, is because you're speaking from everything from a philosophical point of view.
yeah.
Everything's you know, you're trying to solve these problems and think of it through and through a specific ideological lens, and you're bound to miss something. And and so I think that's necessarily a problem. But one thing I always try to say whenever I'm talking about the type of system that I'm advocating for as a libertarian is I'm going I'm I'm all about allowing people to have their particular system for their particular community, and not forcing me into whatever system they choose. They can pass whatever laws they would like. I would just like to live in a community that allows me the freedom to operate without intervention and coercion on peaceful people. That's pretty much my whole thing. And I know it won't be perfect, but it can't be as bad as it is today.
I think we can all agree we would like to see more personal liberty and less state control. The vast majority of Americans, I think there's a substantial minority that they just can't their solution to everything is a central government bureaucracy. It's a religious belief in their mind,
Mm,
and it's. I think we're never going to convert them to libertarianism. I think we can show them that, hey, we do have common ground in some areas, that this would be better. And so when it comes to those people, I think they can we can show them that, private membership associations, that's better than the insurance run cartel that we currently have. And I think we could use that to show them and maybe get them to kind of soften their positions.
right.
And I think that's something that we could do. I really do.
Are there any potential downsides to the private membership associations?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
It comes with certain. The main thing is it's set up that this is the private domain,
Right.
and it's kind of like we just, you know. So the big, huge problem is if you're operating strictly as a private membership association,
Mm-hmm.
how do you attract new people?
Right.
Because it's kind of like that is the big danger that you have is if you're going out promoting the association, or the court's going to turn around and say, well, you're not really a private membership association if you're doing all this, you're promoting and advertising and so forth. Fortunately, in this day and age, we have this wonderful thing called the internet,
Right.
and there's it's basically, I argue, and several others have argued, that if you have a website saying that these are the benefits experienced by our members, that's not really promoting. That's just kind of like, hey, these are the benefits experienced by our members.
Well,
Here to join
there
us.
that's a that that sword doesn't always cut just one way because I don't know if you remember there was the Amish guy that was selling that salve and he was putting on that salve tube what his customers would write him, and thank him for making the salve. And somebody had written him saying that I had put it on my skin cancer, and now my skin cancer was gone. And now the man, he's a like 60 or 70 year old Amish man looking at 60 years in prison because the EPA came after him.
I hadn't heard about
Or
that, but
not
I
the
wouldn't be
EPA, the
surprised.
FDA came after him. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tom Woods had interviewed his attorney about a year or two ago. I'll have to find that for you.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle we say of like I know there was one association that was trying to use like stem cells to
Hmm.
regenerate chromosomes.
Right.
And I mean, I did some research on it, and I think their argument was very valid. But apparently, the FDA jumped up and said that no, that was an untested experimental medical procedure, so we were not legally going to allow you to do it, which is another drawback. Or I wouldn't say so far as say drawback, I'd say limitation of private membership association. You can't use it to do anything that's specifically illegal. Okay, so you can't like form a private membership association to transport cocaine,
Right.
for
Well, you
example.
can, but you're going to be caught up in the middle of the drug war.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I
Pablo
mean,
Pablo Escobar tried that.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So anything that's specifically made illegal by statute
Hmm.
or something that you know had to go back and hear my notes and see it's kind of like I can't remember the exact phrase I use. Yeah, presents a clear and present danger of substantial evil.
Right.
And now I think the vast majority of alternative medical people, they're not that they're doing the polar opposite of doing anything that clear and present danger of substantial evil. But we can't form a private membership association, or we could do it, but we wouldn't have the legal authority to overthrow the federal government, for example, or engage in slave trading. You can't do that.
Right.
But also, one of the drawbacks is that the IRS doesn't really recognize these things to the best of my knowledge. So you still have to pay taxes. All
Right.
right. And also, insurance companies absolutely hate these. I mean, the whole thing, whole one of the main driving forces behind it is to get around insurance companies.
Right.
So if you're going up and it's like, hey, I want insurance companies to pay for the treatment done through a private membership association, the insurance company's going to say no. All right, you got to go to one of the people that we have approved of and people who are in our system. And also, there have been a few cases where people have had to dissolve an existing business in order to restart as a private membership association. That has happened on a few times.
Do you
Now,
have
I
any
can tell,
details about why that happens or how that happened?
well, it's kind of like there's different states that have different rules on it.
Mm,
I know that the there was a movement when the early days of this happened, the one I'm involved in with my chiropractor, where they said, well, because you're a private membership association, you cannot hire a lawyer to represent you in a court of law. Well, my response is, excuse me, but I am a member of the private membership association who just happens to be a lawyer in the state of Texas. So they're not hiring me.
I'm volunteering
It's,
it.
yeah. So, but they tried to get me to go to Arkansas and make the same argument. I'm like, look, folks, I love y'all, but I don't mind basically having fun with a little petty bureaucrat here in the Dallas area, but I'm not too wild about going to Arkansas and spending my own money to do the same thing. So you got to find somebody in another state to do that. So I know that has come up in particular in Arkansas,
Mm.
that they came up with a rule that's said that a private membership association could not hire outside counsel to represent them in a court of law.
Oh,
So
that's
that has come up.
hmm. That seems like a that just seems so authoritarian, so tyrannical to say no, you're not entitled to legal counsel.
Well, I make the same argument. Like I says, I mean, in my area, it was simply easier for me to say, well, it doesn't matter. So, like, so what if you got that rule in this particular case? Because I am a member, and I can certainly represent the membership at a court proceeding.
Right.
And so that was my way around it in one particular case. But yeah, so that is one of the major drawbacks at this time, is that they use that they can't hire an outside counsel to represent them in a court. So that is, we frequently see this in legal proceedings. It's kind of like a constant game of hare and hound. They set the rule here. We've moved the rule out. They set the rule out further. So that's, you see that a lot in the practice of law. And
Yeah.
this is a new area, and we're still working out kind of like, where do we draw the lines on
And
a case by case basis.
are there private memberships like this in every state, operating in every state as of now, or are they pretty limited still?
I really don't know. So I mean, I'm sure if you look around in each individual state, it's a growing practice,
Okay.
and I don't know just how widespread it is. Like I says, the internet has been a big thing, and also one of the advantages is you're not limited by state boundaries. Like I talked to you about I'm told about the doctor in the Beaumont area who
Right.
set it up specifically so he could treat people from Louisiana.
Hmm.
So that's one of the huge advantages, is you can cross state lines much easier with a private membership association. So if you ask me, is there one in Louisiana? I have no idea. But like I said, I'm told there is one in Beaumont that treats people from Louisiana.
Right.
So like I said, one of the advantages of the private membership association is you can cross state lines. It's much easier for the people to cross state lines.
And are there any other legal drawbacks that you've encountered or that you see as potentials? Are they are insurance companies at this time worried enough about private membership associations to where they're actually lobbying the federal government to do anything about it or anything like that taking place?
Probably. It's probably being done in private. I suspect there's probably a lot of dark money involved in campaign contributions. I'm told there are Securities and Exchange security law regulations that they can't have more than 35 shareholders. I mean, whatever a shareholder is. So, like I said, a lot of the rules are being worked out on a case by case basis.
Right, right.
And, it's not the main focus of my law practice. And so I can't really talk about what's going on, you know, in Massachusetts or Virginia or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Uh,
can also tell you that one of the advantages, as far as just strictly with medical providers, is as an attorney, we keep running into it's called HIPAA, HIPPA.
I've heard of it. Yeah. So what does
Yeah,
that stand for?
I cannot tell you off the top of my head. It deals with release of private patient information.
Okay.
I mean, for example, your wife Beatrix, you just heard somebody says that she's in a hospital,
Uh-huh.
and you call up the hospital in Beaumont, start calling up hospitals in Beaumont, like, hey, I'm looking for my wife Beatrix. Is she there? They're like, well, we can't tell you unless she signs a HIPAA release. I mean, it's that strict as far as release of information that hospitals cannot even let somebody know that someone is a patient in their hospital unless they sign a HIPAA release
Hmm.
to release information. Well, the private membership association gets around a lot of those HIPAA requirements,
Okay.
restrictions as far as releasing. So that's another huge advantage of it. It's much more able to kind of like just give out just basic medical, just to be able to tell family, hey, this is where she's at.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can tell you as a lawyer, dealing with getting HIPAA releases signed to release information is a major problem. And so the Private Membership Association gets around that.
Okay. And
And also, well, one of the also big drawbacks is kind of like you got, because they're able to cross lines, but you may have different levels within association for things like state, local, and federal practices of what they can do. So you may have something that's illegal in Texas but legal in Nevada,
right.
a medical procedure. Okay, well, so kind of like you may have like someone that's the provider care crosses the state lines and said, well, this was perfectly legal for me to do if I was in Texas. And Nevada says, well, you wasn't in Texas at the time you did it, though. So, you know, that's something that you have to watch out for.
Right. Right. So this is actually the one of the most intriguing parts I'm finding in this is my mind's working because I've always been of the kind of mindset that if somebody wants to practice, whatever kind of religion or medical seek out any kind of medical care, it's up to them. Now I know there are certain things like you brought up stem cells earlier and stuff like that that are there are legalities around stuff like that, but I can see this as a potential for people of different religions. um they, I mean, just as an example, and it's a silly example, but like if somebody really believed in voodoo, like they wouldn't need, insurance to go to, their local, you know, facility to get whatever procedures or spells or whatever cast upon them. They could actually open up a little membership type facility very similar to this and deal locally. And so I find that really interesting that it opens up so much freedom for everybody in so many different ways, especially when it comes to your autonomy and the care that you're giving your own body. So like holistically, you could, if you want to seek out somebody who believes in like herbs and in these holistic medicines, you could actually form a membership around that, you know. So that seems really interesting to me.
Well, also you have the advantage of when you're treating patients in the public sphere, you can get into a great deal of trouble for refusing to treat a public quote unquote public patient. Whereas on the opposite, if you're treating a member of the association, you can kick them out for any reason, for no
Yeah,
reason at all. You can
yeah,
say, you know what, being a jerk, I'm kicking you out.
right.
So,
I don't
you
like your
know, that,
haircut.
yeah, I don't like your haircut. I'm kicking you out. All right. So, yeah, that's also an advantage. And like I said, I can tell you that, you know, I was seriously involved in yoga when I was doing the rehab for my elbow. And I mean, the vast majority of the people I were around in yoga were just wonderful people, and the females in particular were great to be around. But you know, every so often there was somebody who was just a total jerk, and they say, "Hey, get out of here." All right. Whereas if you're a healthcare provider in the public sphere, you can get into a great deal of trouble for refusing to quote treat a public patient.
Right.
And so that's another advantage that the private membership associations have. And
Hmm.
also, you talk about the disadvantages. Now, I'm a lawyer now, so and I will admit that my profession has been part of the responsibility for driving up healthcare costs. However, if you are in a private membership, they can have restrictions about one member being able to sue another member or the association. So, yeah, if you have a medical malpractice claim, for the example you used of the Amish guy with his oil to cure cancer, kind of like you don't have a hard time. You may have a hard time suing the guy for medical
Right.
malpractice
Yeah.
because and they usually don't have medical malpractice insurance either. And I, like one of the whole purposes is to get around the requirements of insurance.
Well, you're trying to
So
avoid the entire bureaucracy, so it's
well,
not.
you're trying to avoid the main thing for me personally, like I said, was to avoid the stupid cartel requirement that I had to consult with an orthopedic surgeon before I could go to physical therapy to rehab a broken arm.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like I said, being a lawyer, I saw immediately that that was just a means to make money for orthopedic surgeons, and it served no real legitimate purpose other than just making money for orthopedic surgeons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wanted to get away from that. So that's what led me down this path.
Well, I mean, that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to look up and do some more research on this, and I'm gonna have to find this guy in Beaumont that you're talking about.
He may not be there anymore, so
Yeah.
I'm just told he was there. Okay, so, but I mean, if you check around Beaumont, you'll probably find. And like I said, the internet is a wonderful way to find these people. And so the big huge danger is the courts and bureaucrats saying that, well, you're not in private, you're promoting yourself publicly. And so that the internet is great because I think you can make a legitimate argument is the membership association is allowed to have a website,
Yeah.
and they're allowed to say, here's the benefits experienced by our members. And so that's a great way to find them and contact them without the bureaucracy and the cartel saying that they're promoting themselves publicly.
Yeah. Well, you got any final comments about this? Anything that we didn't touch on that you feel like is important to get out there?
Well, nothing else I can think of in the moment, but I think it's a way that's going to help people. But I think it really ties into, you know, police power is only supposed to protect the public.
Hmm.
Still supposed to be based on liberty and freedom, and that the basic principle of law is that you can do anything except what the law specifically forbids.
Right.
And so in our legal system, there is a tradition that people need to know about and understand better. And I think that this ties in very well with a legal system and the non-aggression principle that we libertarians talk about, that as long as you're not hurting other people, that you can peacefully assemble in private groups to do things without the government interference.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of the people that are listening to me are Harry Brown fans, so they're all looking for freedom in an unfree world right now.
Well, good luck. All I can say is good luck. Okay.
All right, I'm going to shut this down.
All right.
All
Have
right.
a good time. Talk to you later.
All right, buddy.
All right, I'm Tommy Salmons. Late.